Just getting this out of the way at the very beginning, in no way, shape, or form am I asking for money. I realize with this title, it could sound like that. That's not what this is about. And instead, I'm actually just asking for advice from you all to help improve the show that I've been doing for years here, because I feel like there's been some recent stumbles that I want to fine-tune to make fantasy news as pleasant and consistent as a watching experience as possible for you all. Basically, I'm constantly trying to figure out which stories to pick, which on a surface level seems pretty straightforward. You pick popular or niche but interesting fantasy science fiction stories to present to a wide audience of goblins. Yeah! Except it kind of gets more complicated than that, because we do live in a time where there is a lot of interesting influences coming into what exactly defines a headline that could qualify for fantasy news. And I'm personally kind of worried that I could end up annoying people or sounding repetitive, or even worst case, God forbid, feeling like the entire show is just trying to sell you stuff. So let's get into these concerns so that hopefully I can get some really great engaging feedback from you all, so that forever after, fantasy news is fine-tuned to be exactly what you want it to be. Okay, let's start defining a problem here. So here's an example, one that came across recently that I believe I made a mistake on. We had the news that a new series of Gentleman Bastards short stories was going to be released, and I covered that in fantasy news, brought it to you all, made you aware of it, and moved on. But when they actually dropped, I didn't cover that. Yes, Scott Lynch has officially released new short stories taking place within the Gentleman Bastards sequence. And I, in my head, was like, I've made my audience aware of that. They know it's coming. I don't need to cover it again. But once they actually dropped, I ended up getting quite a few comments that were like, yo, I don't think everyone knows these are out now. You probably should have covered that again. And in hindsight, I agree. The Gentleman Bastards sequence borderline started getting into like near the Patrick Rothfuss Martin territory of people mentioning it as a series that would like never get new entries. So them finally fully dropping, I probably should have gone back and covered that. But it gets a bit more gray with stuff like, let's say, for example, Kickstarters. I am very paranoid with how many Kickstarters I cover here. Some of them I'm even paid to cover for like special editions, and we're careful to make sure there's never any conflicts of interest there. But I didn't get paid to cover, because you can clearly tell it's not a sponsor segment when it's not in the fantasy news, the new Discworld tabletop RPG. But I did cover it a while ago. But when it officially went live and I didn't cover it in fantasy news, I was really surprised by the number of comments I got from people being like, why didn't you cover that that's now live? And in my head is like, because you could have signed up for the wait and I already mentioned it. But do you want those to be covered like once they drop as well? I personally am very afraid that fantasy news at times feels like it's just special editions, things to spend money on, new books to spend money on, and I don't want that to be what the show is, right? The stories I personally love covering the most are the ones that we saw about like Del Rey last week, or occasionally even really interesting controversies like what happened with the Hugo Awards. I still absolutely adore talking about book covers and special editions. It just feels like there's a limit, right? And I've never, frankly, I did a ton of research into how people like Philip DeFranco kind of handle this, follow-ups, and how traditional media. But fantasy news, not to like toot my own horn, it's kind of different than a lot of stuff, right? It's a genre-focused news show. And so I wasn't able to find exact answers because, like, I don't know, in hindsight, yeah, a tabletop RPG for Discworld dropping on Kickstarter could be big enough to absolutely be worth noting again, but I don't feel like there's a definite answer. So instead of just me sitting, reading a bunch of different opinions from people who don't know exactly what we're talking about, I figured, why not do the smart thing and just ask the goblins? What do you think the policy should be on stuff like this? Do you personally feel like there's been too many Kickstarters, too much special editions, or no? You never feel pressured to spend money when I cover them, and you're just happy to see them and think it's neat. That's kind of the big question I really want to ask to you all. And it may sound like a kind of minor thing, but I don't want to fall down a could-be slippery slope of making fantasy news feel like it's about people spending money or about being pitched things you want to spend money on, which is why I really try and go out of my way in the Discord Fantasy News channel where I find the stories to purposely pull out things that are very not that. Like, there is a very high chance I will cover something if it's industry related, genre related, and does not involve people spending money. So basically, I'm just trying to take the pulse of the horde, right? What are you all feeling? And on top of that, how have you felt the balance has been recently for like the amount of quick stories in the news and the amount of like deep dives? I try and make it so there's a lot of just fun. Hey, this new game looks cool. We got a trailer dropping for this that looks neat. I didn't like this specific update for a project, but then there's usually, I try to, in every fantasy news, a bigger, chunkier story that maybe you strongly disagree with me on. Maybe you don't even listen to what I have to say. But does that me feeling like there's been a good balance recently reflect in you all as well? Or would you know, you just want me to try and get through as many stories in a week as possible without giving too much about my opinion, because this is admittedly a news aggregate show. Because certainly there's times where it's like, people might be interested in that, but I have to cut it for time because I need to focus on this bigger story. There's no right or wrong answer. I don't think I'll be able to make everybody happy, obviously. That is my big question for you all. And thank you so much for anyone who cares enough to give an opinion and, you know, likes the show, continues to support here. And I really, really appreciate it. And then one final kind of serious thing before we get into just a bunch of smaller topics I want to just run by you, get your thoughts on. I've been having minor memory issues ever since the second time I got COVID. Not long-term, just kind of short-term issues that after doing some looking into can certainly be related to a long form of COVID that I just hope clears up in time. I'm going to be seeing a doctor about it before too long. But if you notice that the videos seem a little more difficult for me to word good, that's how I'm going to say that. And I think it's been affecting my ability here to cover the news sometimes as well. So if you just notice any small mistakes, please give a little bit of grace until I'm able to get properly however I can take care of that. But now, little things. I know in the last few episodes, shows, what have you, I've been like mouthing the mic. That's because this room has no sound padding yet that we're setting up to be the new office in our home in New York, not the city, the state. And so, yeah, I need to make sure that the gain is low and that this is close to my mouth so it doesn't sound like this all the time. But by next week, there should be better sound paneling up and the studio will be looking a bit better. I occasionally get people asking about like what I use for sound paneling. I don't use like the styrofoam things anymore. If you're a content creator watching this, unless you're just getting started and have like a severe budget constraint, I wouldn't recommend investing in that. These like wood panel things that I used on my last location, love them to death. I'll have an affiliate link down there. That's the closest thing of a sponsor to this video. I just genuinely recommend that product. Haha, we are selling.
It's that humorless, I've got a feeling we've been had sick feeling.
And if we're just doing quick news, fun updates, I'm over 85,000 words on Better Dead, my next book. Can't wait. So excited. And if you're dropping recommendations, also let me know if there's any booktubers out there you'd like to see guest host fantasy news as well. I always have so much fun bringing in smaller creators, helping get them some eyes. That's always just an important part of the community as well. And also, I want to give a shout out to other people who have kind of started their own fantasy news equivalents, like Petrick Leo and Shelf Centered. Both of them have not only taken a fantasy news-esque concept and made it their own, but inspired me to make tweaks and changes here. So if you need even more fantasy news to fill up your week, check them out in the links, of course, description down below. And I do promise cover reveals are never going away. I'm always going to be obsessively looking at cover art. Anyway, I'm rambling at this point. Like and subscribe, all that good stuff. Have a good one, y'all. Peace.